life? Why do people, are they allowed to take Xanax for anxiety, but they're not allowed to use a vaporizer or have an edible or take some tincture? So I just wanted to address that.
The appearance of wellness does not mean that medically marijuana could not be health enhancing for you.
Okay. Let's go on. Okay. This is directed to no on B side. Measure B would allow 8 ounces of processed dried marijuana per patient, correct? And the question to the no on B side is, there is also the option that if the doctor feels that the patient requires more, that the recommendation could be higher. With that, on Measure B, what would be required more? Why would you need more than 8 ounces? And why would you need more than 6 plants to supply a medical need?
Excellent question. I think that Dr. Keegan can address that.
Well, for some people, 8 ounces is clearly insufficient, and we wouldn't say that you can only have 8 Percodan pills a day or 5 penicillin tablets if your condition requires that you need more. In fact, you're entitled to more, and the courts have ruled that you're allowed to have as much as is reasonably necessary, and whether it's pain pills or antibiotics or medical marijuana, if it's 100 times more than the average use, you're allowed to do it. Second, about the doctors, there is no doctor that's going to recommend that you use marijuana and give specific numbers in amounts. Why? Because the simple fact of recommending medical marijuana makes you susceptible to investigation by the California Medical Board. So for 7 years, if you made a recommendation for medical marijuana and did it completely legitimately, but someone reported, didn't even have to be your patient, someone reported that Dr. Keegan's prescribing medical marijuana, that triggers an investigation. And believe me, the California Medical Board is a legal enforcement agency. The police are on your case. It's a horrendous experience for doctors to go through, and it costs thousands of dollars to defend yourself against their tricks. So 95% of doctors say, I'm not doing medical marijuana recommendations. You may have arthritis, you may have migraine headaches, but I'm not giving you a recommendation because I don't want to deal with the California Medical Board. And more than that, they never taught me about it in medical school, so I don't know anything. I can't prescribe. And so 95% of doctors are perfectly legitimate to say, can't, don't know how, and it would be like shooting myself in the foot. There are some doctors who do want to do the medical marijuana authorization because it's important, but they've been clearly advised by the California Medical Association, don't write amounts or plans. That's just putting the noose around your neck for when the feds and the state authorities come. So there's no doctor who's going to write an amount. They'll give you a general recommendation that they approve of marijuana use for your condition, but that's what you're going to get. That's all you need if you're a medical marijuana patient.
Well, SB 420, in fact, does provide that a doctor would not get in trouble, basically, for recommending a specific amount. And it says in 420, if a qualified patient or primary caregiver has a doctor's recommendation that this quantity does not meet the qualified patient's medical needs, the qualified patient or primary caregiver may possess an amount of marijuana consistent with the patient's needs. I mean, to say that that's going to recommend a higher amount is going to open a doctor up for lawsuits or recommending it at all. Well, you know, you'd have the same problem. I mean, can you imagine if they wanted to recommend Xanax and just said, well, just take the amount you think is appropriate? Well, that would be a little risky. I think that it is appropriate for a doctor to recommend the amount he finds necessary. That's more appropriate than us, you know, us here to make that decision. It should be up to the doctor.
Well, and I'm a little amazed to hear the statement made that no doctor will recommend marijuana, because in fact that's the only way ultimately that medical use of marijuana is legal, is with a doctor's recommendation. And state law in the Senate Bill 420, or is it Senate Bill? Senate Bill 420 specifically provides for that. And in fact, we do have physicians in this community who prescribe medical marijuana, most of them on a limited basis for people who have very serious illnesses. We do have at least one physician, Dr. Courtney, who has an office and specializes in the practice of medical marijuana. So to think that you can't get a recommendation from your physician is simply not true. We think the question of the amount is best left to the patient and their physician.
Rebuttal. I didn't say that there aren't any doctors that will do medical marijuana. 95% of them won't, but there are some who will, and most of them are really pursuing it as a specialty area. There's a need for it. When I said that no doctor is going to specify the number of plants or the number of joints or the number of pounds that you're allowed to have, because there's no consistency in strength. So as soon as the doctor tries to say 6 plants, they're vulnerable to investigation because 6 plants of what type. So you can't say we're going to have the doctors specify the amount because they won't do that. When they say the doctors are protected by SB 420, what a joke. They wrote that into 215. All the doctors were protected. You couldn't be investigated for prescribing marijuana. For 7 years we were investigated. They weren't investigating us because we were prescribing marijuana. They were investigating to find out if we did the proper evaluation before we recommended the marijuana. This went on for 7 years until the California Medical Authority finally got them to stop investigating any doctor who prescribed it but prescribed it appropriately. It had to at least think the guy was crooked or criminal.
Okay.
Well, again, instead of setting an artificially high plant count of 25 plants, which is clearly a commercial amount, and people sell the excess, we think it's much more reasonable to have a reasonable amount, which is provided for in state law, an amount that was adopted after extensive hearings before the state legislature. And if a patient needs more than that, consult with your physician. We have heard Dr. Courtney go into extensive detail about the specific amounts that certain patients needed. Again, that's best left up to the doctors and their patients.
May I please have a rebuttal?
No.
I think we each have a rebuttal left. Okay, let's move on. I'm sure we'll come back around to this topic again. Sure. Okay? All right. So, some of the questions are similar. I'm going to put them together and get the basic question here. Okay? The basic question is Measure B going to stop the large grows? And the compliment that goes with that, this is going to the yes side, is that someone wrote that they own 190 acres of land and will Measure B protect me from trespass grows. Those are similar. Okay? Is it going to stop commercial grows, and is it going to stop trespass grows? Well,
I'm sorry, is it my turn? Are you asking? That's my question.
Go to you.
In repealing Measure G, it will pull back the kind of prohibition against law enforcement, really. Measure G specifically precludes law enforcement from going after large grows. I mean, they want to stop camp and comment. In a letter recently written by the author of Measure G, Richard Johnson, they specifically, well, matter of fact, my lovely secretary here is helping me with my the author of Measure G wrote another kind of provision of Measure G, that is, the supervisors are ordered to rein in the sheriff and DA to the extent they make all marijuana enforcement, not just that in excess of 25 plants, the lowest priority. This prohibits participation in any discretionary program such as Comet, Camp, or the annual marijuana aerial identification school. And what's really significant about this is that those are the tools. That is the method by which the law enforcement agencies in Mendocino County go after large